Do you wanna build a snowman? Hey everybody, we are going to talk today about teaching tarot, or really teaching anything, but this is a tarot channel, so we're going to talk about teaching tarot. Now, in addition to having been a tarot reader for over 20 years, and a YouTuber for, a bunch more, and a teacher and writer about the topic, I have spent 20 years of my adult life in corporate adult learning and development, which may make you want to turn this video off right now because that sounds insanely boring. But it's actually really not. It's a fascinating topic, and it's really helpful if you want to get into teaching tarot. And frankly, if you want to make money with tarot, teaching is the way to do it. Let's not fuck around. So, what do I know that you need to know if you want to embark on a journey of teaching tarot? Well, here are some tips. The first thing I would say is that if you want to get into teaching tarot, or any other divination system, is to figure out why you want to get into teaching it. Now, if money is your motivator, whether it's reading, teaching, writing books, speaking at conferences, it's a tough one. Yes, I said if you want to make money in tarot, teaching's where it's at. But the reality is that it's a big market. I mean, it's a big world out there. There's a lot of people teaching. And if your motivator is money, you may find that that's not going to come as quickly as you want, which may leave you demotivated, which sucks. So you want to find a motivator beyond that. And I don't think most people watching this are motivated by money anyway, but I think it's worth considering if money is your motivator, maybe consider another way to make it. Why do you want to teach? Why do you want to help other people on their journey to reading, whether it's tarot, Sibylla, Lenormand, whatever? What is it that makes you excited about teaching? Now, I'm a teacher at heart, and part of the reason why I'm a teacher at heart is that I was a terrible student, or at least I thought I was. The reality is that grammar school and high school taught me that I wasn't good at learning, and that I was dumb. And part of that is because the education system in the United States doesn't teach. It instructs, it lectures, and it doesn't matter whether the information you're getting is relevant or whether it matters to you. It matters that someone decided it needs to be on a test and that you need it in order to graduate. So by the time I got to the end of high school, I had realized that I was not really worth anything as a student. And so I had given up, probably by the time I reached my sophomore year. Then I kind of waddled and waded through community college for a few years. And then I stumbled into corporate learning and development. And that was where I learned I wasn't stupid. It's where I learned that the way that most educational experiences exist aren't really focused on learning. They're focused on ticking the boxes. Through that process, I kind of found a vocation as someone who can help people find confidence when they're not feeling it. And that's kind of my motivator as a teacher. Whether I'm teaching at work or I'm teaching tarot, or in the past I've taught writing workshops. My motivator is to create an environment where people will come away feeling more confident in whatever skill it is they want to learn than they were at the beginning. That's my motivator. Now, I don't want you to copy my motivator. We all have different paths in, we all have different access points. So you don't need to have that be your motivator. Although wanting to help people get better at something is a pretty good reason to do it. But whatever it is for you, find it before you start structuring or thinking about even advertising a class. The other thing about that too is ego. Now, I talk a lot about ego both in my books and on this channel, and I think ego is a very natural, healthy part of being alive, being a person in the world. But I also think that if ego is a motivator for you, you really want to question as much as you can what ego is really doing. If you want to teach tarot because you want your ego validated and you want people to think you're brilliant, well, we're going to talk about why in a minute, but that's not great. You want to have a motivator that is a little more generous than that. Now, hey, I'm a Leo. I enjoy being told how awesome I am. And that's a great part of being a teacher, is that when you do it well, people are going to celebrate that. But if your primary motivator is ego, you're probably not going to get that very much, because the focus becomes about you and not the learner experience. So it's key to have a motivator that is not monetary or ego-driven, but a motivator that is really about the experience of teaching. Maybe it's connecting with people, maybe it's building community, maybe it's helping people achieve goals, build confidence, whatever it is. But find a motivator, find a reason you want to teach that's deeper than just money and validation. And once you've done that, the next thing you need to do is explore what it is you have to bring to the table that's different. What you have to bring to the table that's unique to you. And everybody has it. But there's a lot of people out there teaching tarot classes. What is it that makes your class unique? What's your pitch? What do you have to offer that's unique, special, and that's going to inspire a student that they can't already get from someone who has a reputation already? Now, there's nothing saying that just because someone has a reputation, that means that they're the best. It just means they have a reputation. But still, when you're fighting for market share in a business, which, let's be honest, once you start charging money for something, it is a business, you need to find a niche that makes you stand out from the crowd, that makes you have something that makes someone go, oh, I need to try that. And if you don't know that before you start to craft your course, your materials, even your marketing plan, it's going to be harder to sell what you have to offer. I didn't start teaching tarot until well after I started my channel, because though I love teaching, I didn't feel like I had anything new to say. It wasn't until I realized that I could structure a class in such a way that I felt like I was bringing something fresh. And that's when I came up with the tarot jams. The idea behind the tarot jams is essentially that there's not a lot of stuff out there for intermediate and advanced readers once they've gotten to a certain point. And that became my way into teaching. I identified a gap in the market and I decided to fill it in some way. And so I developed a series of these tarot jams that are designed around special topics rather than foundational skills that help people deepen their practice. And it's focused on specific techniques and styles that aren't covered really elsewhere, and that I've developed over the years. But the other thing that I do is I'm very, very dogmatic about telling people that I don't believe in dogma. And maybe that sounds weird, but part of my pitch as a teacher is that everything I'm telling you is only useful if it's useful. Meaning that if you don't find it helpful, it's not the right answer for you. I don't believe that there's a right way to do anything. I believe that there's the way to work for you, or the way that works for you. And I believe that my job as a teacher is to help you find you reading like you, not find you like you reading like me, if that makes any sense. We need different readers. If we all read the same way, it would be very interesting and we wouldn't need very many of us. And the market's already pretty small for tarot readings as it is. So my two pitches are that I want to help you deepen your skills so that you can feel you can get over that hump of beginner status, but also to help you find your voice as a reader. And through doing that with the intermediate and advanced classes, I found a way into teaching foundational classes too. But I didn't start teaching a foundation or a beginner tarot class until I had a sense of what I could offer that wasn't being offered already, a Tom Benjamin way of doing things. And again, it was focused around my worldview about tarot, about that the world of tarot exists in the world around us and not in some metaphysical sphere where it's all about the unseen and unknowable. My approach to tarot is very much about the seen and the known, or at least seeing what hasn't been seen and knowing what hasn't been known. That's my way in. That's not the same for everyone. And again, you have to find something that's authentically you, something that you really believe, something that you really offer. Because people can tell what isn't authentic. People can tell when you're sort of offering what you think people want to hear. And that doesn't sell well, you know? I mean, as tarot readers, we want to be able to trust readers. We also want to be able to trust our teachers. So those are two really important things before you even get into the process of teaching, is to know why you are doing this, what motivates you, but also what you have to offer, what your pitch is, what makes you unique, what do you bring to the community, what do you bring to your students that's fresh and that comes from your lived experience. It can be anything. There's a lot of opportunity to teach classes in tarot in things that are not being talked about ever. There's a huge opportunity to offer classes in decolonizing the tarot, for example. If you think about what the Golden Dawn did, how much they stole, there are classes that could be made around the idea of decluttering a lot of tarot nonsense that really doesn't belong to the Golden Dawn to begin with. And that's just an idea. There are tarot writing classes, there are tarot metaphysics classes, intention setting, spell work. Just find a thing that you're passionate about. Because however much experience you have, if you're not passionate about it, that's going to read too. One of the keys to teaching these days is to understand that a lot of what we've understood as learning in the past comes from educational systems that really aren't built to teach anything. In the corporate world, we call it spray and pray, where you just spray a lot of information at someone and hope that it sticks. It never works because people only remember what matters to them, what has value, and what's relevant. A lot of what we learn in school is numbers, dates, math problems. When I was an undergrad, I had to take 2 math classes. And this wasn't when I was a kid. I dropped out of college when I was 19 or 20 because I was still feeling like an idiot every day. When I finally went back in my late 20s after getting into learning and development and I discovered that I wasn't stupid, I had to take these 2 math classes. They made me cry. I never cry. I'm not a crier by nature. In fact, sometimes I wish I were. But the classes made me cry because each week I remembered as much as I needed to get by, as much as I needed to pass the test, and then immediately forgot it. Not only was it not relevant, I didn't understand most of it. And by the time I got to the final, I ended up failing it because I only remembered the last week's worth of information. The key to teaching is to connect with people emotionally and to get them thinking about how this matters to them at a very deep internal level. At a very deep level that makes them go, this means something to me, and I care about this. We remember what matters, and we retain what we care about. In order to do that as a teacher, you really have to involve students. And a lot of what most of us have experienced as education doesn't do that. A lot of modern education is this spray and pray technique, where we sit in a lecture and we listen, and we write a paper, or we pass a test. Again, that's not learning. But it's also how a lot of tarot classes get taught these days. And there's nothing wrong with sharing your experience and sharing your wisdom, but you have to center the learner. And that's a thing where I think a lot of folks fall down. Not just in teaching tarot, but in teaching generally. In my book, Your Tarot Toolkit, I talk about how the readings need to be question-centric and querent-centric. They need to focus on what the querent wants to know and why they want to know it. Classes need to be student-centric. They need to focus on what the learner knows and what they want to know and why they want to know it and what they want to get out of it. A learning experience should leave someone different at the end than they were at the beginning. It should transform them. They should have abilities that they did not have when they started. And in order to do that, you have to get them in the sandbox. And getting them in the sandbox is difficult. Now, we're doing something fun. It's not like tarot is some kind of slog that we're forced to do, like some algebra test. But people have egos. As we talked about earlier, and egos are fragile. And in order for people to feel safe in the sandbox, you need to create an environment where it's okay to fail, where it's okay for people to not have to have the right answer, to not have to get the perfect response, to not be impressive, that they don't feel like it's an audition, that they feel like it's an experiment. And that's really key. The doing of that kind of requires the decentering of the teacher. And that's one reason why I try not to call myself a teacher, even though I've used that word throughout this video. It's because the reality is I'm a facilitator of an experience. I don't have to put into people what I know. I can share examples and theories that might inspire them. But the aim, as much as possible, and I don't always succeed at this, but the aim as much as possible is to draw out of the learner what life experience has given them. And the key to teaching tarot is to recognize that everyone has individual life experiences that are going to be invaluable into interpreting the cards. Tarot isn't really so much about memorizing card meanings and then putting them together like a puzzle. It's about drawing on experiences and context clues to interpret patterns that achieve an answer. So, to do that, a learner, a student, needs to look at the cards through their own lived experience and draw from the myths and methodologies and techniques and images and symbols, not from a memorized list, but from how they experienced them. It's got to be less about the teacher and more about the student. And so, again, if you're an ego-driven teacher, this is harder to do because you have to sort of force yourself to let people sweat it out or to guide them to getting there, you know. Sometimes we want to show our students how brilliant we are at interpretation, But if we show them the answer, or at least our answer, then we're not helping them find it themselves. And that's really the point. It's actually a reason why I'm not a big fan of forums online where people go to compare answers with one another. Because what you're learning to do is discover how someone else would read, not how you read. If you go into a forum and you want to figure out whether or not you're reading well, the best thing that your peers can do is ask you questions to help you narrow down your answer and find focus. The worst thing they can do is tell you what they would say. And as a teacher, we have to remember that. So when I'm teaching, for example, when we're working through an experiment, which is what I call our activities, I don't share how I would interpret it until everyone else who wants to go has already done that. It's tough giving up control. But a good teacher does. A good teacher trusts that their students are going to navigate the waters in the way they need to. And though we have a plan, some kind of lesson plan or outline, we're not so rigid that we can't let the conversation flow where it wants to. Because again, it's about the learner. They need to discover what they need to discover, not what I think they need to discover. So having an outline and slides and handouts, all of that is great. And I think you should be a prepared teacher. But I think you also want to have an outline that allows for discovery. This is beneficial for you too, because when you do that, when you remain open to the students as much as you would remain open to the cards on the table when you're interpreting, you are going to learn more. And I found that teaching is one of the best ways to learn anything, especially if you're open to it. There are too many people who are motivated by trying to be impressive. And I know that because so much of my life, I have been that kind of person. It's insecurity. We want to show how much we know so that people like us. If that's the case, then write a blog or start a YouTube channel like I did. But if you want to teach, it can't be about you and how impressive you are. It's got to be about helping the learner, helping the student find out how impressive they are. That's the job. And that's really the main key that I can offer if you want to teach a class. Make it your job during the lessons, during the outlines, during the conversation, to help students find out how impressive they are. Because people are very good at this. The best thing as a teacher that you can do is ask questions. Open-ended questions that inspire people to think and that force them to wrestle with things they would normally let you answer for them. It's huge. And that's maybe one thing you can prepare more than anything else, is lists of questions that you can ask when someone is stuck, when things aren't going well in the discussion, or when people are afraid to contribute. I'm an introvert. And participation for me is not always easy. And that's another thing that I recommend building into your curriculum if you are going to teach, is the recognition that not everyone is going to want to participate at the same level. Extroverts who are super excited are going to want to talk a lot. Introverts who are a little shyer and more reticent won't want to talk a lot. The key is not to let the people who want to talk do all the talking, and not to let the people who don't want to talk never talk. There has to be balance. But for introverts, they require special care and feeding. It's important to offer them a space where they're not going to feel like they're going to fuck up or say something stupid. A lot of times when people don't want to participate, it's because they're afraid to say the wrong thing. So as a facilitator, again, you're constantly building this safe sandbox where even people who don't normally like to participate will feel safe doing it. It takes time and it takes experience and it takes practice, but it's definitely doable. One of the things that I offer in my first day when I'm working with a group is to say, look, I want you to experience. I want you to participate to your level of comfort. But I will call on people gently as time goes on to bring them into the conversation. Not too much, you know. Some people will participate as they warm up and they get more comfortable with you and they get more comfortable with the other participants. But it's important to make sure that people don't take over either. Enthusiasm makes people excited, and sometimes when we get excited, we ramble. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with you as a facilitator saying, hey, great points, I know you're excited, can we just pause and see if anyone else wants to take the microphone for a minute? As long as you do it politely, you're not going to shut someone down. But that's the other key. And again, when it comes to safety, we want to make sure we're not shutting anyone down. We're trying to create an environment where it's safe to learn and safe to experiment. That's really the whole thing. I think of teaching as creating a laboratory where students and participants get to play and experiment and get messy. My book, Tarot on Earth, was called Tarot on Earth because I wanted people to feel like they could get in the mud and get dirty and experiment and play. And I try to create classrooms like that as well, even though they're mostly Zoom classrooms. These are some really important techniques. Everything else really comes from your personality. Who are you as a teacher? You got to be yourself, and ultimately sometimes the only way to do that is to experiment and play. Especially in digital times, you've got to get used to sitting in front of a camera and engaging with it like a human being. One of the hard things I face is that my camera's here, my monitor is there, and I'm constantly sort of, when I'm looking at my students, looking away from them, and when I'm talking, I have to remember to look at the camera. It's important that you do try to connect with people if you're teaching this way, although I'm not very good at it when I'm doing a Zoom call, just because people want to feel like they're being listened to. And so it's important that you as a teacher are actively listening. The next thing I would say is to finally find focus. You can't teach everything there is to know about tarot in a 6-week course. And so you've got to boil down what's reasonable. What do you really care about? Find a nugget, find a theme that you can maybe do 6 workshops on each week, or something super specific that you're really good at and that you're really excited about that allows you to dissect and deconstruct it over the course of a short amount of time. Another thing you can do is something that teachers like Sheila Haidt do, which is to create a whole certification process where over time you can keep taking classes that build on each other, sort of cumulative learning. And if you check out her website, you can see how her astrology and tarot classes do that. That's another way to manage it. You can't boil the ocean by trying to cover everything there is to cover in one 5 or 6 week workshop or even a 1-day workshop. So keep in mind that in a way, less is more. The deeper you can dig into particular topics and techniques, the more people are going to come away from at the end of it. And invite people to measure their progress in some way. The way that I invite my students to measure their progress is basically the same way that I talk about in your tarot toolkit, which is that they're able to craft an answer that's logical given the question, that actually answers the question, and that's provable based on the cards in front of them. I really encourage students not to worry about whether they're right or if, where they made predictions, those predictions were accurate, because those things are, in a way, out of our control. Peer feedback, client feedback, querent feedback may be good or bad, but that may not really reflect on the quality of the reading depending on what you said. I say this all the time, but a client may not like a reading because you told them something they weren't ready to hear. On the other hand, they may love a reading because you validated something they like about themselves, but they're not taking away the salient point. But if you as a reader are able to understand that you answered the question, that it was logical based on the question, that you can prove it based on the cards on the table, you should feel pretty good about what you did. And I guess ultimately that brings me to something about being a student, which is that when you're going to take a class, have a sense of what you want to get out of it as a learner. Have a sense about what your goals are and what you want to do as a reader. The thing that happens in tarot, well, really in social media generally, is that people with a lot of attention tend to get a reputation for being really good. But just because someone's famous or just because someone's good doesn't mean that they have what you need. Recently, I got a message from a person who said that they hadn't had a really good experience with a certification course that they had signed up for. Luckily, it wasn't mine. I don't do certification. But the thing is that just because other people like an experience or got what they need from a class doesn't mean that you as a learner will. It also doesn't mean that the teacher is aligned with your values or goals or really even your worldview. And so it's kind of a buyer beware situation. If you're looking for a teacher, if you're in the market for mentorship, it's wise to do a little research to get a sense of who the teacher is. Even if they're well known, even if they have a reputation, books, videos, huge subscriber base, that doesn't necessarily mean they're speaking to you, and that's fine. It's important that you identify what you need as a student and that you find teachers that get you what you need. So don't be afraid to do your research. Don't be afraid to look into what they've written, the videos they make, their social media posts. And even if you really like what they're making, or you at least admire how they're doing it, don't assume that just because they're well known and they have a reputation that they're what you need. It's an interesting thing. There are lots of people who I admire and who have taught me a lot, but who aren't actually kind of doing what I'm doing as a student. And there are a lot of people who I think like what I'm making who don't read the way that I do. So it's important that as a student, you kind of have a sense of what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve, and that you are willing to and brave enough to talk to your teachers to get a sense of who and what their philosophies are, who they are, and to see if it makes sense for where you want to go. Don't be afraid to talk to your teachers. Don't be afraid to ask them questions before you sign up and really dig into what their values are, what your values are, what your goals are, and how they can help you achieve them. In a world where there's so much opportunity, where there's so many people offering so many things, and, there's a cost for all of it, there's no reason not to engage and make sure that you're getting something close to what you bargained for before you, click the buy button. Not at all, In fact, the more research you do, the more agency you take as a student, the more likely you are to get a sense of who the teacher is and whether or not they're right for you. Just because you like someone or admire their work doesn't mean they're necessarily going to help you achieve their goals. Not because they're bad or wrong, but because you have your own journey. So as a student, it's kind of buyer beware. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, make it your business to get a sense of whether a teacher is right for you or is speaking your language. As a teacher, your job is to create as much experimental ground and safety as you can for students to experiment. As a student, all you have to do is take whatever fertile ground exists and use it to your advantage. But the main thing is that learning is cool, and giving yourself over to it is awesome. Whether you're a teacher or a student, there's a lot of opportunity there. So that's it, he says into no particular camera. If you want to teach, you can. Have a mission, have a pitch, have what makes you unique, and have a reason beyond ego and money to do it. If you're a student, know what you want, or at least expose yourself to people who can give you a space to find that out. Every class should be a lab. Every class is an experiment. So find people who let you do that. And if you're a student, you want to find teachers who have you first, whose focus is you and not them. And I guess at the end of the day, for teachers and students, that's the thing. It's the students who matter. So, as always, take care, be good, and we'll talk soon.